how to do this because I don't want to make it a Q&A. You're welcome to ask a question. And in whatever you ask me, I won't answer it if it's not within the confines of this little program about proving that the trial was bad. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Joe Lopezzi, and I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time, and in the beginning I did a lot of criminal defense work. And I could tell you, I've lost track of the details of this trial, but no public defender office would ever allow their attorneys to admit the guilt of their client. So this attorney who represented the defendant here is guilty of malpractice. She would never, could never admit the guilt of her client. That's a no-no. That's a given. Secondly, she didn't cross-examine the two of the main witnesses about the killing of the police officer. That's beyond belief. That's malpractice. This attorney, whoever she is, I don't even know her name, should be disbarred. But it's clear to me that this was the biggest setup ever, because the public defenders didn't have the willpower or the ability to do the right thing. They cowed down to Washington, D.C. for, well, I know why, but I'm not going to say. And the simple point is, this could never have happened if things were on the up and up. So, thank you very much.
Joe, malpractice does not cover this problem. Her behavior is criminal. I'm going to read from Blackstone. That was in 1769, before we became a nation, so we were colonies of Britain. And the Blackstone's book, which is called Commentaries on the Law of England, says this: embezzling or vacating records or falsifying certain other proceedings in a court of judicature is a felonious offense against public justice. It is enacted by Statute 8 of Henry VI that if any clerk or other person shall willfully take away, withdraw, or void any record or process in the superior courts in Westminster Hall, by reason whereof the judgment shall be reversed, it is felony not only in the principal actors, but also in their abettors. To prevent abuses by the extensive power which the law is obliged to repose to jailers, this isn't about Jehovah, it is enacted by statute of Edward III that if any jailer, by too great duress of imprisonment, makes any prisoner that he has in his ward become an approver or an appeller, I guess that means a snitch, against his will, it is felony in the jailer. A third offense against public justice is obstruction the execution of lawful process. This is at all times an offense of very high and presumptuous nature, and it has been held that the party opposing such things becomes thereby an accessory and a principal in high treason. Why treason? Because the law is sacred. You know, you're not supposed to hit the king, but you're also not supposed to hit the king, which is law, rule of law. So back in 1769, they knew what they were doing. And I can tell you that even in 1969, when I was in my salad days, we also knew these things. They have just sort of disappeared. I think people are probably overwhelmed by all this stuff on media, guns and terrorism and national security, and you forget it doesn't matter. Rule of law is rule of law, but thank you for telling us that, Joe. Yes, sir.
I noticed on your talking about him going to the milk store, Whole Foods.
Yeah.
The bombing was at 2:50, and they have him at 3:12. This is 22 minutes. Do they talk about how he could have done that? I'm not sure which Whole Foods, if that's on River Street or near Inman or
They
Central.
said Cambridge.
Yeah, there's a couple of Whole Foods. And
I was interested to go walk it or ride it or something myself. Certainly they couldn't have parked a car near the marathon on the day of the marathon.
Yeah.
But no, in the court, of course not, because the whole point was not to knock the story. It was to tiptoe around any problems in the story and just
on a radio station, they mention him going to the milk store, and they mention it in a way of showing him as being like an animal,
That's
cold-hearted
right.
animal,
That's
that he would
right.
go to a milk store after
Yeah.
doing this, you know,
Yeah.
like go on with his life and not care. They used it that way. The other thing is on your screen, it said exchanges milk. What did that mean?
Oh, that was just...
That was just a
He
mistake.
went back, no. He went into the store, bought a half gallon or something, walked out and walked back and asked the cashier if he could change it for skim or
A
something.
different date, maybe,
Yes,
a
that's
fresher.
what they meant by exchange.
Okay, but that's it, thank you, yeah. That never was addressed, though, yeah, the time.
First of all, I'd like to say that I have talked to several people who knew Jahar personally in school, and they said he was a really wonderful person, and I could tell they were telling the truth. I have 3 quick questions for you. Assuming that Tamerlane's confession to the carjacking, kidnapping victim was true, and that the receipt was found in his wallet, just assuming that's true, it looks like Tamerlane was the criminal, and Jahar was just in his company. Is it a criminal, capital offense to be in the company of a criminal when a crime is being committed? It seems like it's a lesser offense.
But all of these were pinned on Jahar. Not the buying of the pressure cooker, but even going into the moment of carjacking. Yes, it was Tamerlane, everybody says, but then his brother climbs into the car and proceeds to be part of that. So
Okay.
the answer is they pinned these things specifically on Jahar. They didn't say the other boy did it, and yet they were using the theme of the other boy did it. I think they used it where they didn't have enough to deal with. They just said, oh yeah, well, you know, he's a radical Muslim and he indoctrinated the little kid. And that
Okay,
was the ploy. It was constantly in the media about that relationship.
Right, but it seems if the older brother did it, then at the very most, the younger brother, there's a lesser crime there, it seems to me. Has Jahar been interviewed since? I mean,
Not that I know of.
okay.
He's under SAMS. You know, if you're a terrorist, you can't speak to people. Do you remember Lynn Stewart?
Yes.
She died recently, but she was the lawyer in the case of the blind sheikh or something. And she ended up in jail. She died. They would let her out of jail at the very end when she had cancer. But her crime was, as a lawyer, you know, defending her client. Not exactly. They said she tried to pass secrets out from, I don't know if she did or not, but it then helped to justify this SAM, Special Administrative Measures, by which you just can't talk to anybody. And he's really incommunicado.
Okay, that just seems like his rights have been taken away. Where was the gun found? They only had one gun.
I'm afraid I don't know, but it was an exhibit in the court case, and I could,
Okay.
if you read
Because
my
it-
book,
Okay,
my book is called Marathon Bombing.
okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. There are 3 things that just don't add up to me, and I'd just like to state them and see if anybody knows anything more about them than I do. The first is that after the marathon bombing, there was a female witness who was supposedly having lunch at a restaurant near the finish line that day, and just quite a coincidence, she was also a witness at Sandy Hook. She has been named. She is a professional crisis witness actress. The second thing, Jahar was seriously wounded. You listed his injuries, but somehow was able, in that condition, to write with a pencil on a fiberglass interior of a boat an extensive confession.
But not if he got those injuries as he emerged. You know, the 288
suppose.
bullets, I think that is actually the story.
Okay,
Yeah.
but let's say that he was not injured until after he wrote the confession. I think it's hard to write with a pencil on the interior
Fiberglass.
of a fiberglass boat.
You would break the pencil.
And that pencil was very sharp.
Yes.
Okay, the other thing is that there were a lot of references to a private security company that was also at the marathon. And there was a lot of talk in early days about who paid for or who hired that separate security company. I spoke to a number of police 1 year later, and they said, well, we don't know. There were, special security people, but nobody's fessed up to arranging for them or paying for them. So I say, what's the big secret? Thanks.
I'll just repeat from my lecture. I show how a RICO case, everybody know what RICO is? Racketeering and corrupt organization, something.
Statute?
Yeah, something like that. And it came from like the 1960s. And it's supposed to be, by the way, if you live in Watertown and you had an economic loss, you can file a civil action under RICO. It's mostly filed, I think, by one business against another, by one large corporation against another, though the Department of Justice has a mandate to use it if they see this happening. Of course, it never happens in the way that I proposed it, but you as an individual can sue for, my business had to shut down for 2 months because of this. That brings you into the market of being able to get in on RICO, and then in that RICO suit, you have to show a pattern of criminality, and it has to have at least 2 eligible crimes in it, but practically anything is eligible. And you can bring in, you could accuse Homeland Security and I don't think I'll mention other possibility groups, all in the one case, all attempting to get back your $200 that you lost. And yes, sir.
Rich O'Coin from Worcester. I'm just curious about the backpack. You stated that the fact that they showed a black backpack proved Jahar innocent. Did they explicitly say that backpack was Jahar's and not Tamerlane's, or potentially Tamerlane's?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, and I'll hasten to find out. However, Jack Remington Graham has made a major case out of this and put it to the court, and he's a very meticulous lawyer, on the idea that Jahar is accused. I can only say anything Jack Graham would turn out would have to be extremely well researched, and he says they have accused Jahar, never mind Tamerlane, of doing that one of which there was a picture with the black, and then they also always say, here's a photo of Jahar at the marathon, and there on his back is that grayish thing. So,
and just another comment. One of the more compelling pieces of evidence against the brothers I've seen is the Shell station footage showing it is them getting out of the car, going in, buying the stuff. See, we know that they were in the car with this Chinese kid. The circumstances of how exactly that did occur are questionable, but I think it should be reasonably clear that it was them with him.
I would say it's of the same quality as these other ones. It's very low quality.
No, inside the Shell station footage
no,
is
inside
quite
the
clear.
inside the Shell.
And showing them going back and forth in the vehicle, I believe it's them. It looks very clear to me that it's them. And so that would have to be explained by you.
Well, you see the way these things are compiled, and they are admittedly compiled. So when you say that there is a picture of Tamerlane walking that away on the tarmac of the Shell gas station area, and then you say, and he just came out of the car, well, you'd really have to see him in the film coming out of the car. You can't just take him.
It could have been spliced, but you would have probably, for me as a juror, that would be, unless you could prove it's spliced somehow, I'd be compelled by that.
Compelled on the kidnap story.
Right, I would, there's many other reasons not to believe the official account.
I'm glad.
And you did a great job pointing those out, but these were the 2 that stuck with me.
Thank you. I know there's a queue there, but would someone else who wants to go against me please knock me down? I want to hear, Rebuttal.
First of all, I do think you raised some great points about a lot of in the prosecution's videos, for example, of him at Boylston Street allegedly dropping the backpack, and at the Sean Collier murder, there's no identifiable people in those videos. But I wanted to raise a question about something you said in your presentation. You said that there's no evidence of the brothers on Laurel Street besides that one photograph you depicted?
There's about 3 photographs, but they're very similar.
Well, I've seen multiple photographs that were published by Andrew Kitzenberg on that night, and it's very clear that the brothers are right in front of this house, and I forget the address, but I know who lives there. I don't want to put his name, on TV, but in front of Andrew Kitzenberg's house, and they're clearly, it's not really clear if they're shooting, but they're there. The sweatshirt that Jahar wore that night, the Adidas sweatshirt that you can see him wearing in the surveillance video from the Bank of America, and that he's wearing in the pictures of him when he's leaving the boat, he's wearing that exact same identifiable sweatshirt with the yellow stripe on it. I mean, I just was wondering why those other pictures weren't mentioned in the...
I didn't know that there are any ones that show the face. I mean, lots of people have Adidas costumes. Is any of those ones that you mentioned identifiable personally of who it is?
I would argue that in the Laurel Street photos, it's pretty clear that they're there, but, that doesn't mean that they were necessarily shooting at police.
You say they were there.
Tamerlan and Jahar.
Why do you pick out Tamerlan and Jahar other than the costume?
So you think that the people on Laurel Street in the photos by Andrew Kitzenberg, who are wearing the same clothes that Jahar and Tamerlan were wearing that night, those are other people in costumes and similar? I mean, that's a possibility, but is that what you
On the
think?
boat side, he definitely has blue jeans on, and in the one picture, the only one that I know of that I showed 3 times, the boy that you, I think, would say is Jahar, has black pants.
Okay, but what about the sweatshirt? The same one? I mean, they could have just purchased 2. Is that what you're proposing?
No. Jahar did get convicted. I mean, jurors did say there's enough to satisfy them. What I'm really looking at here, and I have to say it's because of the Martin Bryant case that I cut my teeth on, when you see a lawyer, a defense lawyer, behaving way out of line, then why do you well, I give it to you, but you'll have to come back to me with more than just a jacket, because 100 people can have that jacket. It would have to be identifiably them.
I mean, my point is, even if they didn't do anything wrong, I think Jahar and Tamerlan were on Laurel Street at that night and were being shot at by police. I mean, you were saying they weren't even there. Where were they? I mean...
We have another video here, if you want. Do you want to stay for another 5 minutes? It's called the Podstava video, which shows the brother to be elsewhere. Well, can you...
I have seen this, actually. I agree.
Can you run that? This
This guy lives here, he does not know who he is.
Okay, once we have officers complete that, expand it to more blocks in those areas. Okay, we have plenty of police officers here.
This guy here, watch, lying on the ground. Those are his shoes, and his face is up there somewhere. At 486, see, he just said Podstava, Russian for I've been
set up.
Set up. And his family says, yeah, that's it. They know the voice and they say the body is right.
You're saying that that's who?
Tamerlan.
No. You're saying that that's Tamlin right there, laying right there saying that?
I am.
Oh, okay. I'll wait in line. Okay.
I came a few minutes late. I don't know if you acknowledge this, but Sergeant McCullen is here. He was the senior officer on duty that night, and I personally want to thank you for risking your life for all of us. No. But my question is actually directed to you, Sergeant, because I'd like to actually have you clear something up. Chief DeVoe made a speech down in, I believe it was in Arkansas. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but it was somewhere down south at a university. And in that speech, he said that you guys were shorthanded by one man that night because one of your officers was bringing a witness to the Collier murder to Cambridge. Is that true?
That is true.
Who's the witness?
There was a girl who was at a night class at MIT. She was leaving the night class. She saw the officer get assassinated by these two gentlemen, and she was so scared she ran. She got on a bus. She got home to her house. Told her father. She actually lives about a couple of 100 yards away from the police station. Father called the police station. Told her what her daughter had just seen.
Mm-hmm.
We sent a police car to the house and drove her to Cambridge so she could be interviewed. And as our officer was taking her to Cambridge, the shootout.
Right. So did you have any idea, I mean, I know this is kind of out of your purview, but do you have any idea why she never showed up to court or why she was not a supporting witness to witnessing the murder?
I have no idea who testifies and who doesn't. That's up to...
It's up to the prosecution.
All right, good. Thanks for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Pete Lowney. I'm originally from Newton. Thank you very much for your work. These guys were, in my opinion, they're framed up. They're patsies. The only real hope for getting them out of jail wouldn't be through the system we've got in place. You can't ask the people who did this to help you get the guys that they blame for doing it out of jail. My family's friend, my sister's best friend, my friend Sarah Phillips, was killed on the Lockerbie bombing of Flight 103 Pan Am. I've been watching them do this for a very long time. I have to apologize to you guys. I knew this was going to happen. I warned David about it. I warned my father about it.
When did you know?
I noticed, I was in Boston the winter before this happened. I noticed a large increase in activity amongst the people who plan and organize these things. They had a hand in, they were the primary organizers of the demolition of the World Trade Centers on 9/11. They demolished World Trade Center 7. They put a big hole in World Trade Center 5. In World Trade Center 7 were the records in the Securities Exchange Commission for the evidence in the trial, talking about evidence tampering. That's what's happening here is evidence tampering. There's evidence that would lead you to believe that these two guys did this, but it's been tampered with. She showed some very good examples of evidence tampering. It's not that there aren't witnesses to them doing it or pictures of them doing it, but that is fabricated. Very sophisticated fabrication. If you turn on your television, you'll see graphic images of things happening which never happened. It's completely generated by Hollywood.
Remember when King Kong climbed up the Empire State Building and had Fay Ray in his hand?
Yeah.
But for that, sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but for that you have to have everybody that's in that area in on the conspiracy. Why would I do something like that? A 27-year police officer, why would I set someone up for that?
You're a tool. You're a tool. All they have to do is kill a cop, and they know exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to think, and what's going to happen to the people that they say did it.
So how did they put them in that vehicle? How did they get them in the vehicle? How did they get Johai in the boat? How did they get the brother under the vehicle dead? How did they do that?
They put it on the TV. The guy was drinking milk. having a cup of milk when he watched TV.
But
So all you have to
he's
do is
dead
put him on
underneath the car
TV.
that while we're wrestling with him, his brother ran him over. How do you explain him dead on the ground? How does he get there? How does he get there physically if this is just a big theatrical show? I don't understand how...
I mean, you could prove it scientifically. You could prove that what you saw happened, because in Massachusetts, you get a crime lab where they stamp everything they get, whether it's baby powder, whether it's talcum powder, it's cocaine. And there's hundreds of people in Massachusetts jails who've been framed up on scientific evidence that they had drugs on them. None of which was true, because all it takes is one person in the system to stamp it as true and correct, like yourself. You're stamping it true and correct, and it's not.
That's your opinion, sir. I had my hands on this gentleman, and I watched him.
Yeah, I don't believe you. I think you're lying. I think, how many court cases have you got up on the stand and lied with your hand on the oath? How many people have you put away?
You're calling me a liar?
Yeah, I think you are.
Whom did you see bleed to death?
Huh?
Whom did you see?
I watched Hamlin bleeding to death after he was
Yeah,
ran
I
over by
watched
his
two
brother.
Libyans get blamed for blowing up a plane that Mossad blew up
I had
because there were
nothing
two
to do with
CIA
that.
agents who were coming back to the United States to report the Iran-Contra Israel
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
drug for guns for Contras
Nothing
funding.
to do with what we're talking about.
Yes, it has everything to do with what we're talking
I
about.
want
It's
to
the
hear.
same thing.
I
It's a
want to hear
pattern.
why he wasn't brought in. Why did you not give testimony in the case?
I did, ma'am. Maybe you should do your homework. I did testify in the death penalty trial. Yes, Officer Sergeant John McClellan. I did testify.
And in regard to watching him bleed.
No, they didn't ask me that, but no, yeah, I testified to many things, but I didn't testify to him. bleeding.
Just tell us any two things that you testified to.
Can he talk after I talk?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, I was...
No, finish. I'm good. Go ahead.
I would have liked to make my statement, but I got interrupted.
I now say the interruption has ended and you have the floor.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, like I said, I apologize. Like I did, somebody asked me, like, how did I know? Did somebody ask me how I know? Or was I just saying that, like, if you watch the people who do this all the time, you know what they're going to do next.
What's next?
Well, actually, I'm not watching them right now, but I suspect they're going to do something like they just kind of did this thing in Sweden where they had this hand grenade. So I imagine they're kind of indicating what they're going to do. That's really advanced. I mean, I wish I could tell you. I'm not in the inner circle. I just watch and try and like interpret what's going on in the media. And
You should, if you get something like that on your radar, you should tell people, because there's people getting hurt.
I do. I warned.
In your head, you should tell people.
I emailed media and authorities in Belgium. The media and the authorities in Belgium, just months before the largest diamond heist in the history on Earth, that Sweden's airlines, I told them, were being targeted by, international terrorists. And there was, a short time later, there was the largest diamond heist in history. And how did I figure that out? Well, I watched these people. The people that blew up the World Trade Center are in charge, and they're doing it every day. They're doing it in Syria right now. They're arming death squads that are running around the country destroying it. And the reason why people in this room don't get it or can't get it is because the domination of the media, the fabrication, and the kind of complicity between the military-industrial complex and the media. Otherwise, it'd be obvious.
If you want to look up an interesting statute that is being proposed, but only by a few senators, Rand Paul, my idol, and Tulsi Gabbard, my other idol in the House, and both of them have written up a bill called Stop Arming the Terrorists Act. So, I mean, at least two, there are two people. So there's 535 congresspersons. Well, there's two. That's better than zero.
What this did was, it was an opening round on the war in Russia. These guys were Russianists, Chechenianish. And the United States is now pretty much engaged in a world war against Russia. You can not believe it or you can deny it, but it's true. If you live in Syria right now, you'll see Americans and Russians fighting to the death. And this was a beginning of that war because it prepared Americans' minds for that Russians are the enemy. They're bombing us. So they started their war against Russia by bombing you. And that's what that was. It was an opening round in the war on Russia. Additionally, this doesn't benefit these guys. What motive did they have? Well, who had a motive? That's the only way you're going to help these guys is by finding out who had a motive to bomb the marathon. And who had a bomb, these guys now, this guy's not hard off now. His budget did not go down because of this. He's not getting budget cuts. He's not looking at freeing these people out that have been falsely convicted by the Boston police and thrown in prison on false, proven scientific evidence they had cocaine on them. They're not getting out of jail. No one, the federal government wasn't hearing a class action lawsuit against the Boston police on the day that this happened, or now, we're not talking about freedom or justice or liberty in the Boston Massachusetts legal system. We're talking about, what are we doing? Go home and watch the news. You're going to be talking about bombing Syria. You're going to be talking about occupying Libya, Mali, Yemen. Boston is a weapons plant, which all of the weapons that are being used, many of the weapons that are being used in this are made in Waltham, right next door. World headquarters of Raytheon, cruise missiles, weapons, all the fuses, the electronics are being made right here in Massachusetts. And so there needs to be a justification for that to happen. For people to get up every day, go to work at a bomb plant, they have to have a reason to do it. There has to be some motivation. And this is like getting cattle prodded into supporting that.
Hi, again, I'm Sergeant John McClellan. I did work that night. I was the patrol supervisor the night of the shooting and the bombing. And I got to give it to you. You have a lot of gall for getting up in the air and doing this. I appreciate all sides of it, but I can just tell you, unless the government is mind controlling me and taking control of my whole life, that's not what's going on here, guys. It's not what's going on. And as I said, I did testify in the death penalty trial, so I got to be very careful what I say in case there is a retrial. I got to be very careful what I say. But my question, most of the stuff that I had to say, I had to let out while I was listening to this stuff. I mean, how do you explain them being in the vehicle? And like the gentleman said, they were definitely in the carjacked vehicle.
How do you know that?
In Cambridge.
How do you know that?
Because it's on video, ma'am, and it's not grainy
Oh,
video.
no. Oh, it's as grainy as you can get.
Not the
Yes,
shell video. It's not.
Oh,
It's
yes,
not.
it is.
So okay, well then, how do you explain him dead under the Mercedes with the police officers on top of him? How do you explain that?
I can only say, like I said, if I'm accused of stealing the necklace, I don't have to show anything about the other person that really did it. So if there's a guy named Joe Bloggs that was under the car and not Tamerlan, it's not up to me to prove that.
Okay, all right. And the same thing with the boat. He just happened to be there in the boat, and police started shooting it
Well,
out.
let me ask you about the boat wall confession. Do you find that credible?
I don't really know enough. I think the boat, to be honest with you, what happened down at the boat was a complete craziness. It should have never happened, as far as I'm concerned. I think it was, a lot of people were very scared down there. They thought he still had bombs. They thought he had weapons. They couldn't see into the boat, and someone said he's shooting, and someone got crazy. I don't know what happened down there, and I wasn't there.
But the question is, do you think it's credible that he wrote that on the side?
I'm not privy to it. I'm not.
I can say it's not credible at all. Why can't you say it is or isn't?
Because I don't know about it. I don't look into it. It's not my part of it.
It's like saying the towers fell at free fall speed, but I can't tell. I don't understand. I can't say anything about it. Give me a break.
So, excuse me, are you suggesting that the guys that John was wrestling with, and they were shooting at him, and he was shooting back and throwing bombs at him, you think they weren't there?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking him to answer the question.
And I'm telling you, I'm not. I didn't look into that. I didn't look at that. I don't know if that's. So why would I give an answer to that?
Because it's common sense. We're asking for your common sense opinion whether you think writing on the boat wall with the pencils that tip never broke is plausible.
How do you know that? How do you know that the pencil wasn't sharpened many times while he was writing? While he was writing it.
Pencil sharpener in there, huh?
It's not done with a pencil sharpener. You could tell that it was
So he had a knife
shaved.
in there.
I don't know. I'm again telling you what I know. I mean, you seem to know a lot about it.
I don't know anything, but I give opinions when I think I have an opinion to give.
And I don't have an opinion to give, so I didn't give it. What is your problem with
Here's
that?
my other opinion.
That is ridiculous.
Here's my other opinion as a lawyer, that if the prosecutor doesn't call a witness that is clear that the two people killed the cop, that says that the witness is incredible. End of story.
All right, please. By the way, it's 7:25.
I'm not sure what all to say, except one thing hangs in my mind, that I researched the backpacks And I'm of the impression, I was reading the FBI evidence of the backpacks. And I may be beating a dead horse, I don't know, but I got the impression from what I looked at on the internet that the FBI evidence of the backpacks, I believe, were black, and they were wearing white. So I don't understand. To me, it's a closed case. I'm not arguing there wasn't gunfights, whatever. I am arguing there's something wrong with this picture where they have white backpacks, and the FBI says it was black backpacks. And I'm not going to go into much further about...
We did say that earlier before you came in.
What's that?
Maybe it would have got blown up and was inside out. I don't know.
And as far as conspiracies go, I know about them because I had friends that grew up in satanic cults. That's never on the newspaper where there's baby sacrifice. So I know that these people do these dreadful things because I have friends who grew up with those dreadful things.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work. I read a lot of your stuff on the Australian newsletter, whatever it is. Hello, Jahar. I doubt if you'll ever see it, but if you do, hang in there, brother. My name is Billy Burke. I'm from East Cambridge, Mass. I lived about a quarter mile from the brothers. I've never met them. But I did spend, I don't know, 100 hours on reading about the case. So the main thing that gets me is the crime scene was destroyed in the Sean Collier murder. Sean Collier, the officer at MIT, was murdered by somebody, and I don't believe it was them kids. Now they got these two guys that did it, maybe. They got the kid on the bike that didn't see nothing. Now, the crime scene is the cruiser, the police officer's cruiser. And if that thing was destroyed, that is a federal crime or some kind of crime, destroying a crime scene. Now, President Kennedy was murdered in '63. His crime scene was a limousine. What did LBJ do with his crime scene? He said to destroy it, took out the windshield, totally might as well just destroy the car. The crime scene was gone. The crime scene's gone to Sean Collier's. There's never going to be a trial there anyway. Now, here's the other thing.
Can I point out that the person who destroyed that call, I said that it helps Jahar, but never mind the fact that it helps Jahar. It is a crime to destroy evidence, and in fact, several of young student Jahar's fellow students down at UMass Dartmouth were formally convicted, and they are in jail for destroying evidence, which was like...
Yeah, you're not supposed to destroy evidence. If they had a real lawyer, Judy Clark is a joke. She's a government plant. She's the lawyer for the... she's got like 3 politically connected people, and she comes here. You know, it's a scam. It's a friggin' scam. But anyways, the other thing, how did Lee Harvey Oswald get caught? They didn't know who he was. They didn't know how somebody murdered, 2 guys murdered Officer J.D. Tippett in Dallas. Neither one of them looked like Oswald. Oswald was an FBI person. He was in naval intelligence. He was sent to Russia on a mission. He was sent to New Orleans to infiltrate people. He was a naval intelligence person. The Marines give you, the Navy runs the Marines. Anyways, he's on loan to the FBI, to this one now.
Hang on a second. Sergeant, before you leave. Sergeant, can you...
Coming over here. Sir, please calm down.
I'm trying, but somebody got a piece of candy. Anyways,
candy. Yeah, we have candy.
Oh, candy.
We have candy. Yeah.
Anyway, J.D. Tippett's murder. Oswald was sent to the Dallas police, the Texas School Book Depository to infiltrate a group of people that were gun runners. But what he didn't know is they were putting him there, so when they murder the president, he's the guy. All right, he's supposed to meet Hosty, his FBI handler, or somebody at the theater. So he's going to the theater. Meanwhile, they murder a policeman, and he looks suspicious, supposedly. And everybody shows up at the theater, and they grab poor Lee Harvey Oswald. He says, "I'm a patsy." "Yeah, okay, Lee, yeah." No record of any interview. Oswald was totally set up, but the reason they got him was because they killed a police officer. That's what set it in motion. How did they catch Jahar and his brother? They killed and murdered a police, somebody did, I don't know who. Somebody murdered a policeman, which led to them. Now Tamerlan, he was married, he got a kid. He doesn't get his citizenship because at some point he either hit or pushed another woman, and so now he can't get to be a citizen. But wait, we might be able to help you, FBI guy. Can you help us out a little, Tim? We just want you to do it. Go to the mosque, just take a few names, you know? They sucked him in to being a player.
So, Sergeant.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we can't go back on it. There was two faces there.
Yeah?
What do you make of the guy on the left?
What do you mean, what do I make of him? I don't know.
Like-
I just to let you know, I went up to that scene and viewed that man. I was there at that scene. I went up to that scene and I told him to release him.
You're talking about 486. Hang on. All right. That and that's not the same person. So what's the story with this guy?
We tried to contact this gentleman from that night. From that night on, we put it out in social media. We tried to figure out who that was because it was an outside agency who stripped him, and we wanted to apologize to him.
An outside agency?
It was either Boston or state police. It was not Watertown police officers that actually stripped him. Apparently, the story that was told to us that he did not speak English. They were telling him to show his hands. He wouldn't, whether he was under the influence of alcohol or didn't understand. So they thought he might have had bombs, so they told him, keep taking things off, and that's why they
But you mean that guy?
That's the story that they told. I didn't see that. That's the story.
But we are referring to him, not him, right?
Excuse me?
That obviously is the face of Tamerlan. That's unquestioned. The things you just described, you applied to this guy? What you were just saying about take off your strip, are we talking about this man or that man? It's not the same person.
I'm talking about not Tamerlan. It was a gentleman who they stripped him of clothes, and it was not Tamerlan. And he was released that night.
Okay, that's what...
Well, the news makes a lot of mistakes.
You could say that. We have two more people, so keep it short.
Sergeant, I don't know, I have an opinion on whether or not that's Tamerlan. Looks like, but I don't know. But how would you get Tamerlan and Shokar into Watertown to be either shot at or what? Well, if you're the Mission Impossible team or the CIA or whoever does these things, you grab these two kids, they're under your control. Whatever happens somewhere else is fine. You got to wait for the movie to happen. People show up, you throw them out there. Did his brother really run him over? I'm sure you see the dead kid on the car. Did you see the brother run him over? I mean, why would the brother could have kept going and took off. Instead, he took a U-turn and said, well, I ain't gonna hit my brother. He ran his head over. Come on. I can't deal with that. And as far as him writing on the wall of the boat, you know, that's a joke.
Mary, I want to commend you for pointing out so many of the weaknesses in the prosecution's case. And my name is James Perloff. I've been a journalist since 1980. Sure. My name is James Perloff. I've been a journalist since 1985 when I started writing for the New American Magazine. And one of the things I've always tried to do is look for the story behind the story. In most major events there are. And just to give one quick example, not to divert from our topic, but in 1991, we fought our first Gulf War. And public opinion was affected by the testimony of a woman who claimed she was a Kuwaiti nurse who saw incubator babies thrown onto the floor to their deaths by Iraqi soldiers. It turned out she was not a nurse. She was not in Kuwait at the time. She was, in fact, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. And what people thought was a congressional hearing was actually a stage show. It was not a real congressional hearing, but it was...
No.
Hilda Knowlton trained this young woman on how to testify.
That I know, but that doesn't mean it wasn't real. She did talk to Congress.
Oh, she definitely she testified, but my understanding is they actually set that up.
Oh, yes, they did, of
course. Like a genuine hearing, which is very easy to do.
But once they found out, once Congress realized they had been tricked, what did they do? They already had a war based on it. This is not the Iraq invasion of 2003.
We're talking about 1991, the
We've
first
been
Gulf
around
War.
for a while. We're talking 1991. And this girl, she was the daughter of the ambassador, and she was under 18 supposedly, so you wouldn't arrest her. There's a little bit of problem with diplomatic immunity too. But anyway, even if she was able to go free, having lied to Congress, which is a felony, then it still was up to Congress to say, okay, we got tricked, right? And therefore, any policy decisions we made based on what she told us, if that's false, we got to change them, and they never do anything. Am I right, or did they?
You're right. What you're talking about tonight is actually part of a long-term process that's been driving us unnecessarily into wars and into an increased police surveillance state, an Orwellian state. And I know there's a lot of conflicting evidence concerning what happened with the Boston Marathon. I wouldn't doubt that the brothers were in some way set up, involved, there on the scene, perhaps as patsies. But what I wanted to tell you was I go on a lot of podcasts and radio shows, and are you doing a kind of a book tour to get your messessage out in the United States? Is this the start of a tour for you? Or?
No, I'm going back to Australia in a couple of weeks. Okay. I should do that. I'm not a good marketer. I'm always busy researching.
Oh, well, it's been a marvelous presentation. I want to thank you for it. And I'd like to give you my card at the end of the program. I can get you in touch with some major podcasters.
I'd like to give you all a copy of the Bill of Rights that I forgot. I left over here.
So that you can know that they would be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Beautiful, beautiful Bill of Rights. And on the back,
I just watched again 12 Angry Men the other night, and they talk about constitutional rights, and they examine the evidence, even when the accused's own attorney let him down. I would have loved to have seen that happen in the Tsarnaev trial. But what you pointed out about the attorney not even standing up to plead her client not guilty is criminal. It was criminal.
I think so.
I just wanted to address the questions that the sergeant brought up. Did he leave?
He did. He just left.
I think that we got off track in the argument. It got too heated, and so it became a bit illogical. I think the point, well, I would start with the video of MIT, and it seemed very peculiar that when the brothers were walking back, they were walking so slowly. It seems to me if they just killed anyone but a cop, is even worse. They would be running. They weren't. So that video shouldn't even be watched. But they're just two brothers, two kids. Let's presume them innocent. What a concept. If they are set up, which a lot of us feel really strongly that they are, isn't it so easy I believe it was 4 days, I live in Cambridge, it was 4 days of hell, it was non-stop, 24-hour police sirens in all directions and helicopters going overhead. So bad, so constant that now when I hear a helicopter overhead, I start a panic attack because it was such a bad time and it was non-stop for 4 days. So, of course, those kids who had been labeled as suspects, of course they got the heck out of there. And with all that police traffic on all the streets, they'd be easy to follow. It wasn't that they were set up or actors were put in Watertown. The kids were running. They happened to end up in Watertown. They could have ended up in Waltham or Somerville or wherever, but they just ended up in Watertown, and police descended upon them. What was it? I believe 50 police cars. I mean, everybody was there, and so it was a mad shootout. It was chaos. It had to be chaos.
But in the picture, it doesn't look like there are many cars there. Well, really, it doesn't.
That's what we were told at the time. So chaos, maybe those pictures are faked, I don't know. But in that chaos, one brother died, the other one ran away and hid doesn't mean they're guilty.
Can I interrupt you?
It doesn't mean
How
they're guilty.
would a boy run away from encircled by heavily armed people?
It was dark. Yes, I know, but it defies logic, but we still have to presume that they're innocent, and it doesn't seem like they are presuming that.
That's for sure. Dear lady, you have one more thing?
Yes. I remember that their faces were on TV after the event and before they were captured. So I don't even know if they knew before the event and before their face was on the TV that they were targeted. But either way, I witnessed about a dozen cars speeding down Green Street right before the event.
Before which event?
The Friday night event,
Okay.
where there was a...
Okay.
And I always wondered how they happened to be going down, like, lickety-split down Green Street, and how they knew to go to Watertown. That's always puzzled me. Anyway, I witnessed the...
If you write that to me later with just the dates and the places, I'd be interested.
What's that?
If you will send me that little bit of information in writing. Thanks.
I don't know, maybe a dozen cars going, police cars, going very fast.
Okay.
Down Green Street, behind the post office.
I want to tell you one other thing before we leave the house here. Earlier I said I had my speech all written so I wouldn't deviate from it anyway, and I mentioned that there was the case McCoy versus State of Louisiana. And because I'm in the Federalist Society, I like to listen to their teleconferences and participate. And it's called, one of the shows they put on is called On the Steps of the Supreme Court. And they come right out after they've heard arguments by the justices, and they report to you. So on that day, January 17th, less than 1 week, is that 1 week? Less than 1 week ago, they came out onto the steps of the Supreme Court. The professor's name is Jay Schweikart, and he said, looking good for the claimant, for McCoy. He said that justices, two of the three female justices, Bada Ginsburg and Elena, they were, very for. They weren't making their decision yet, but the way they asked the questions, they were for. He didn't mention John Roberts or Clarence Thomas, but he said the others, like Breyer and Kennedy, they were, yeah, this is terrible. A man pleads innocent and his public defender gets up there and insists on saying he's guilty and even adds in additional incriminating stuff, but you don't even need that. And I thought they were going to rule in his favor, and I've just been told by someone here tonight who looked it up on the cell phone, it was decided a few days after that, and the man lost. The man wants to plead innocent, and he is prevented from pleading innocent. This is extremely sad, folks. I'm not talking about a local judge. I'm talking about our 9 justices, including a majority of who seemed to be on the case favorably last week.
In, I believe it was Tampa, in a hotel room, and that boy ended up dead.
Oh, do you mean Todashev? Yeah, that's Todashev, okay.
Okay, name, I don't remember. All I remember was, it's really strange that he was being questioned in a hotel room.
No, it was in his own home. It was in his own home.
It was in his own home? Okay, and he winds up dead. Well, I've heard that in some beginning law classes, as a joke, they always say, well, if you run over somebody, you got to make sure you back up over them too to make sure that they're dead so they can't talk. Dead men don't talk.
Really?
And when I heard about that, I thought, okay, we got a patsy. We got a lot of dead men who can't talk. It doesn't pass the sniff test.
Thank you, everybody. Please take a copy, a beautiful copy of the Bill of Rights. You can fold. I'm I'm here in the Boston Public Library, and a whole wall of books called a mosaic. Isn't that nice? I'm going to give a talk at the Watertown Public Library January 23rd at 6 in the evening. Please be there or watch this channel and see me doing whatever it is I can do in regard to the Boston Marathon case. And that is, I particularly want to play the role of the defense attorney and give the boy a real defense, as we tend to agree that he didn't get one in the first go-around. And everything that I put forward that night will be taken from the files of the court. It's not speculation by me. It's going to be right out of the transcripts of the file from United States v. Tsarnaev, which is the boy known as Jahar or Jokar. If you will sit through this, take notes if you want, and I think you'll come out the other end feeling that he could have a decent trial. I'm going to pretend I'm doing his defense, and you'll see that there's loads of exculpatory evidence to get him freed. Not that getting him freed is my big goal in life. My big goal in life is that we stop having these outrageous and really tragic trashing of our judiciary and our love of law and the Constitution. It's really getting to be beyond. I was born in Boston, and this is my home territory, the BPL. And you may think it's a bit snowy inside the library. Well, that's how it is. There's a courtyard where we sometimes have concerts. And I was dragged here many times by my daddy, a school teacher. And I absolutely am determined to get Bostonians to realize that there is another side to the story. Sure, they read this conspiracy stuff and they know there's somebody fighting and the truth was not told. But there's even more than that. There's much more to the story. And I have written a book called Marathon Bombing, Indicting the Players. And you can be sure that the players whom I want to indict did not come from Chechnya. Now, let me say this. And I was using this little sign, doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and then I just put this on the back of it this morning, which says, "Courage is contagious." Isn't it true that if you are someone who's thinking about the Boston Marathon and wishing we wouldn't just put up with the nonsense, that if you're alone, and mostly I'm alone, it's hard to deal. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and you don't want your family to be disgusted with you, and what can you do? But if you have 2 or 3 people who understand that we've got to do something about this, even 1 or 2 other persons telling you, yes, we must do something, it motivates you, but also it gives you the feeling that you're on the right side instead of that lousy feeling that you're on the wrong side. And I feel that later, when this all comes out and we all know that these terrible, terrible things happened to us, including the whole psychological operation of being indoctrinated with false material, who's going to get blamed? Me and those of us who knew. So even though people have rejected us, they're going to come back to us and say, "But you knew and you didn't deal with it."